The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, Hail Varsity Radio on the road today, a Tuesday out at Sherman Field in Lincoln, Nebraska, as Southwest JV set to tango with the East JV squad. That is going at 5. We will have a junior update, as in to let you know if he's in or not, and we can all heckle together as one statewide radio show. I'm kidding, of course. Got some emails to read about my parental commentary with baseball this past weekend in Kansas City that are quite humorous, but I won't bore you to start the show off with that. Great to be with you. Hail Varsity on the road here at Sherman Field. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. You can join in, be a part of the show. Numbers to dial in, 489-1240, 489-1240. Or just watch the video. Check out the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel, or the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. That's where you check that out. Elijah Herbel back in studio. Find us each on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And that is that. So we'll get the Texas two-step going. How are things going for Nebraska in the Lone Star State amidst the satellite camp that Coach Rhule and company's at? Some updates from down there. Mitch Sherman right now may or may not be screaming in traffic. I can only imagine 4:08 Central Standard Time in the city of Houston, or prior to that, getting to said satellite camp. So Mitch Sherman of The Athletic will be with us Thursday. We'll check in with Mitch on Thursday as he's front and center at the satellite camps for Nebraska. Joba Chamberlain, gracious enough to join us in about 15 minutes. We'll link up video-wise with Joba if you want to watch his thoughts as longtime part of Nebraska. Jeff Christy is moving on from his role as pitching coach. Jeff Christy, a family friend, a teammate of my brother at Southeast, and Coach Bolt going a different direction. So that is tough news to tackle today. We'll get Joba's thoughts on Nebraska pitching moving forward. So that coming up in hour 2. Bill Bender will join us from the Sporting News, talk about the world of college football, potential realignment, thoughts on Nebraska. What does Nebraska have in Sims from a national perspective? And that is what we're thinking about. And then we'll also tackle some of what's ailing us here as we've hit full off season. Most important games nationally and within Nebraska's schedule, as there's some Twitter discussion about that. 489-1240, Chris at HailVarsity.com to email if you want. Elijah, what's going on, man? Are you getting the air conditioning before a full slate of umping later this week, or how are you hanging?
Weekend slate doesn't look too bad in terms of umpiring for me this weekend. I think I only got 2 games on the slate, so can always handle that. Yeah, I'm just trying to keep my emotions in check as we're still about 27 hours from Game 3 of the NBA Finals. I'm trying to patiently wait for that, keep my emotions low and in check. Tomorrow's the day where my stress can get high again. But other than that, just another beautiful day in Lincoln, Nebraska. I would complain about the heat, but I complain too much about the cold this winter, so you got to have a give and a take somewhere. The perfect time of year, I think, as we all know, is late September, early October. We're not there just yet, so what's the point of complaining until we get there? Because, yeah, it's hot today in Lincoln, but it's only going to get hotter as the summer rolls on. But before we know it, September will be here, Husker football will be here, mid-70s will be here. It'll be beautiful.
What's the T-shirt? Nobody cares. Nobody cares, so we're not going to whine about the weather. I'm in the air conditioning, so
same.
There is that. So let's talk about heat specifically. Imagine how smoltry it may be down at Houston Christian today as that satellite camp's about 10 minutes old. And when I think of some of the news that came out with the On3 reports about Nebraska football, what their mentality's going to be moving forward with this first camp under Coach Rhule, not only in Lincoln as the kids move into the dorms, the Solich dorms. I love that approach. A thought on that in a minute, a little further thought. But just what Nebraska's about these next few hours and few days in the state of Texas. What this says to me, it just kind of reinforces the work ethic of Matt Rhule and his staff. He is not looking for favors or taking anything for granted. Why is he in Texas? Well, it's stupid not to be in Texas, getting up close and personal with a number of potential prospects. Who recruits Texas? Everybody recruits Texas. You have Texas and Texas A&M. You have LSU. You have Oklahoma. Nebraska used to be great at it. They're trying to get great at it again with the number of Texas kids they just took. But TCU just played in the playoff game. Baylor's been really good, thanks in part to Matt Rhule. And then there's the occasional snag out of Texas for some Florida schools. Urban Meyer killed it. He'd get about 3 or 4 dudes that made your life miserable Saturday nights in Columbus. Braxton Miller, a Texas kid. Okay, so I think Travion Henderson's a Texas kid, if memory serves. So the whole world hits the Lone Star State for recruiting. And Nebraska and Matt Rhule and his staff and his ties could just kind of put their feet up and say, well, you remember me from when? You remember me from just a short 3 to 4 years ago when I was killing it at Baylor. We were winning 11 games and went to a Sugar Bowl. I took them from post-Bryles smolder pile to a build. And, oh, yeah, by the way, I hired one of your own in Coach McGuire. And so Rhule's done all these right things, not from a PR standpoint, but he's a good evaluator of talent from a coaching staff standpoint, and he has made deep, incredible connections down there. He could take it for granted that my Texas connections will bear fruit for me when it comes to the recruiting world, and I'll go get those under the radar guys, or we'll be first to get a look-see at somebody, make that impression, and then win the recruiting battle if and when a kid blows up on the recruiting trail. But he is not resting on that rep he's built and earned down in Texas. He's down there sweating away with a number of other programs at satellite camps, but with a number of other high school coaches that he hosted, man. When he landed in Texas yesterday, he flew to Houston last night, and he hosted a coaches get-together. So what this says to me is the work never stops, the details never stop, the chance to get seen and be seen never stops. Even in a place that he is revered, he's still recent and relevant. He is. Nebraska's trying to be again, and in part because of him and how short a time ago it was in Texas for him and his success. Nebraska can be strong in Texas again. So he's just reaffirming that. And he's, again, not taking it for granted, Elijah, that everything's going to be great for us in Texas. He's going to make sure it's great for Nebraska and Texas by being there hands-on.
Yeah, and you mentioned something. I'll get back into the recruiting here in just a second. You mentioned something off the top that I had to do some research on. I looked into. You said, I can't imagine the weather down in Houston today. Well, it's actually about 15 degrees cooler in Houston today than it is in Lincoln, Nebraska. So
he knows what he's doing.
Take that as you will. But one of the things that really stood out to me about this week or so that Matt Rhule's spending down in Texas trying to get some connections made is his football clinic that he had, I believe it was 2 nights ago. It was in the fine print. You may have missed it. This was free to attend for all the high school coaches. Matt Rhule didn't make a penny off of this coaching clinic. It was, we're going to show up, we're going to give you our insight, and hey, guess what? It's free to attend. Our payment is going to be the fact that we get to make that connection with you. That's not explicitly stated, but read in between the lines. That's what it's about. It's saying, we'll give you our insight, we'll give you our knowledge, we'll help you out. in return, just come meet us. Come say hi to us. Come build a relationship with us. And then maybe later this summer, maybe it's 2 summers from now, maybe it's in 5 years, that coach is going to remember that time that Matt Rhule came in and made a connection with him. They exchanged phone numbers, and he's going to call up Matt Rhule and say, hey, I got a kid. I got a kid you're going to want to see. I know we're not a top school in Texas, but you came out and you talked to the coaches that weren't involved with the top schools in Texas, the top high school programs. You came out and you made time for us. And then guess what? Later that week, you gave my kids a chance to be showcased, not just in front of Nebraska coaches, but in front of a lot of area colleges as well. You gave them that opportunity. Those are things that are going to stick in the minds of Texas high school coaches. And it's about that goodwill that Matt Rhule is posting out in Texas. We talked with Paul Meyerberg about this before Matt Rhule was even hired, where he said, if you go ask high school coaches in Texas who their favorite coach is in college football, I'd venture to say that at least half of them would go and still say Matt Rhule, despite the fact that he hasn't been in Texas for 3 years. We're seeing why now. This week down in Houston is showing exactly why. These high school coaches get to have the learning opportunity of a lifetime, a Power 5 Division I head coach who's making in the range of $10 million a year once you all average it out. He's going to come down and he's going to come talk to you for free. He's going to give you that insight for free. Yeah, I understand why Texas high school coaches still love Matt Rhule 3 years later. He is fostering goodwill within that state, and is every single kid that is in a program that Matt Rhule has they have the head coach of someone that Matt Rhule's met. Are all of them going to get back to Matt Rhule? Probably not. But are 1 or 2 of those under the radar guys that no one else knows about that get sent up to Matt Rhule going to end up committing to Nebraska and could potentially be a program changer for Nebraska? Yes, very much so. So that's what Matt Rhule is doing down here. This isn't about necessarily building his brand. That's one way you could look at it, but it's about building those relationships and knowing that, you know what, we might not see the fruits of our labors right now, but 2, 3, 4 years down the line, we will.
The brand part is real, and Nebraska's brand is still good and strong with a lot of the coaches down there.
And what I'm saying is he's not going down there brand building. He's building relationships and understanding that the brand will follow.
Sure. No, right now, it's, to be honest with you, it's been 100 years since Nebraska's played in Texas. Mm-hmm. He is the brand. I mean, it's not that Nebraska's a afterthought brand, but it's a program that's not won or played in the state. They've had a ton of Texas talent go north and do well in Lincoln, and they've had recent kids in the recruiting class go north, and we'll see how things shake out for them with their football career. But right now, okay, the fact that Rhule is at Nebraska is a big deal for Nebraska. It's doing Nebraska solid because of what Rhule's already done down there. So you can kind of merge them together and continue to go on the goodwill tour. And quite honestly, if you've got the old Texas coaching primary right now, from a voting standpoint, you're right. He wins in a landslide as far as favorite college football coach because he does what he says he's going to do. And it's about chewing the fat here, spitballing ideas, just coaches being coaches together. You know, that coaching fraternity is very real. And Matt Rhule's not gotten too big for his britches. He's still all good with kicking it with the high school level because that's something he loves. He just loves talking ball. So to the point of Nebraska and camp, as we fast forward, as they the coaches and the players, Elijah, they're headed to the dorms. Matt Rhule revealed that in an On3 interview. And what's pretty cool is this kind of reminds me of the Junction Boys without the without the rock moving or heat stroke part of things. But I love the fact they're all kind of coming together. Remember the Titan style. They're going off to camp. They're going to share the adversity, the suck, as Jay Moore would say, the suck of camp together, and really just kind of focus in and lock down in on being a one-unit football team together in the dorms, my friend. Well, did you ever hang out in Solich? I had friends that were in Solich.
Well, I was just going to say,
we didn't spend a lot of time in Solich.
I don't even think Solich was open for the most of my college career. I know it hasn't been in use since COVID. I was never in Solich, never once. It's a smaller dorm.
I was never in Solich.
I never stepped foot in that building, so I have no idea about Solich. I know it hasn't been in use for a couple years now. It's interesting they picked that one, but it's about embracing the suck, but also that pure accountability. You know what? You're going to know if the guy next door shows up at 1 a.m. during fall camp and you go, where the hell were you, man? It's different whenever you're living in their nice, cushy apartments off campus, even the apartments that they have on campus. It's a little bit different whenever the entire team, they're on the same floor as me. They'll hear me come back late. That, like, all these things that are a part of dorm living are an important part of fall camp. And it sounds like this is something Matt Rhule took with him from the Carolina Panthers. This isn't something he did with them at Baylor or at Temple, but with the Panthers, they made the entire team, an NFL roster, go stay in the dorms of a nearby college as well during their fall camp, their training camp. And it seems to be something Matt Rhule's taken with him. So he talked about learning lessons from the NFL. This seems to be one of those learning lessons where, you know what? I saw the fruits of the labor of having all those guys in one dormitory hall during training camp, and those are NFL guys. Can't be worse for college kids. That's what I see this as, is it's a learning, or what Matt Rhule has learned from the NFL.
Well, it's symbolism. Be uncomfortable. It's Rocky 3. How did Rocky get the eye of the tiger back? He went and trained in the ghetto with Apollo Creed versus this plush training facility he had built up to being since he was heavyweight champ. So Nebraska's going throwback with some of the less more prestigious living quarters. I like it. Joba Chamberlain's on the way. It's Hail Varsity on a Tuesday.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity Radio live here at Sherman Field, getting ready for JV baseball as Southwest is gearing up, and Lincoln East taking a little outfield and infield right now. Joba Chamberlain, standout Husker World Series champ, and his name's on the wall out here at Sherman as he helped refurbish this beautiful ballpark. Joba, what's good? How you doing, man?
Just trying to stay cool before I have to go outside. It's got a little warm today.
It is a little sticky out. We were whining, and then we decided to look and see what the temperature was like in Houston. That's where Matt Rhule's at for some satellite camps. And dare I say, the city you need 7 shirts in one day is 15 degrees cooler than great old Lincoln, Nebraska. Call me shocked today, but hey, it's early June yet, right?
Oh, just wait 5 minutes. It'll change. It could drop 10 degrees. You just never know around here.
No, I know it. Joba, wanted to get your thoughts on guys you know well, guys you're close with. You're part of the brotherhood with Nebraska baseball. And Jeff Christy parting ways with Will Bolt and Nebraska baseball. Your take on this? I know Coach Childress has been a part of the program as well. So it's pretty intricate with all 3 folks you know and you know well.
Yeah, it was just it was kind of surprising, just running around earlier, and then finally sat down and I was like, well, all right, and it's interesting to see the verbiage that they used and parting ways and what actually that means. I mean, when our pitching staff was ranked 3rd in the league and we had the least amount of walks overall in the conference. So, I mean, it obviously at times wasn't great, but as somebody that you grew up playing against and then playing with, and he's a great coach and has a great mind for what he wants to get done. So, I mean, I feel like there's no problem that he's going to have getting a job. It's just maybe sometimes they felt like what they needed was just a change and maybe philosophy, or, just sometimes change is good and you see what happens. But it was interesting. They just said parting ways, and that was just kind of left a little bit unknown to me as far as like where they actually stood with Jeff and everything that he did.
Want to get your thought, Joba Chamberlain with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Jeff Christy moving on as Nebraska's pitching coach. I mean, I look at, to your point, the team ERA. I look at how the team's pitching performed in Omaha just recently. I mean, the pitching really did well in the Big Ten tournament. But the midweek games, tell me a little bit about the development phase. You had older guys performing well, but some of those younger arms, you just couldn't find a steady arm to lean on, when case in point being those midweek games where you're 6-6.
Yeah, and we touched on that a few times on the show, and I think therein lies either the development or the talent was there. It was the consistency of what it was, and like I said, with the way that they said it in the release and what have you, it's maybe there was something that they saw in that aspect of it that they felt like where that needed to be a change. It's the inconsistency overall, I think, was probably the biggest downfall of what we did as far as a pitching staff as a whole.
Joba, whenever you say inconsistently, I almost read in between the lines there is inconsistently, especially with your depth. It felt like you had a couple guys over the past couple seasons, each team, you had a couple guys that you could somewhat, to a relative degree, trust. A guy or two that were your weekend starters, a guy or two out of the bullpen. But Nebraska's depth, as you got further into the bullpen and further down your list of starters, it felt like the consistency started to go away. So what's your take on developing depth within this pitching staff? Is that an error in development? Is that an error in recruiting? How do you see that? Because I see what you're saying about consistency, but I see it kind of goes hand in hand with the depth issue in Nebraska's pitching staff.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, as far as the development and finding that those guys where, maybe they came in as starters and that's what you saw them in high school. But now as they, get a little bit of man strength and, they start putting on weight, now it's like, okay, you know what? You project more as a guy in the bullpen. And from that side, I could see a little bit of that. But then it comes down to the fact of if you don't have the talent, you just don't have the talent. And sometimes that's just what it is. And so I think both of them play a huge part in it. And obviously, I started in my career, but I also went to the bullpen. So there's sometimes it's just finding that right kid, young man, and be like, hey, we think you project better at this and develop in that aspect. Then also is having the talent to be able to develop it and put it in the right situation.
You got to really identify the role, get the buy-in for said role, and then get the work in to go perform. I look at Coach Christy and what he was a part of with Schwellenbach and Povich and Wynn. You look at Olsen and Kaminska, they'll hear their names as well this draft. So Christy's done a nice job, did a nice job with Erstad. I want you to tell me a little bit about your personal development with Coach Childress. We don't know that Rob Childress is going to be elevated to pitching coach, but the guy's done it before and he's been incredible. So there's that in front of you right now if you're Will Bolt. So tell me the upside if Rob Childress becomes that guy.
I think what Rob did more so, he gave you my slider, so I can thank him for that. I think what Rob did a great job at was he broke everything down. We had a 10-game update, and it was 0 counts, 1-1 counts, 2-out hits, like just little things that we always kept a reminder that was a focus for us. And he wasn't so much a mechanics guy. He was more like our word that year was compete. He goes, you're not going to have your best stuff, but if you go out and compete for me, that's all I can ask. And he put us through the ringer, and, he demanded a lot from us, and he expected a lot. He'd be the first person to dog cuss you, but he'd be the first person to put his arm around you and tell you why. And, you think about that, and it's obviously times are changing. There's a lot of things that Rob did that he couldn't do today. But it's also what he did for me. He changed this. He changed my mentality. Like, you're not always going to have your best stuff, but if you go out and give it everything you got and compete with what you have that day, you'd be surprised about the things that happened. And I think that was the biggest thing. And I think the development from there, and that was kind of always the mentality I kept, is like, there'd be days I'd be throwing in the bullpen, warming up. I'm like, this is going to be awful. This is not going to be good. Like, don't watch me. Everybody leave. Like, I might break somebody's collarbone because I'm going to bounce one. Like, and then you go out and you're just like, you know what? I just got to go compete with what I got. And it turns out to be a great outing. And then vice versa. Like, you're hitting every spot in the bullpen. next thing you know, you give up back-to-back homers in the first, and you're like, well, that didn't go as planned. So I just think it's, with Rob's aspect, I think it's the mentality part of it that really changed it for me, and the understanding of you're not always going to have your best stuff, but you can always go out there and compete with everything you got.
Do you think that Rob's in a good spot being, essentially we'll call him, he's like a floating assistant coach, with that not really being an option in the Big Ten? He's a guy that can be an assistant pitching coach. He can be there and help out. Is that a good role for him, or do you think an elevation to the full-time pitching coach would be a good spot for him? What's your take on this? Because I know he's a guy that's getting towards the back end of his coaching career. He's coming back to Nebraska. It's where home is for him. That's one of the reasons why he took this job, getting closer to home as he's closer to retirement. Do you think that elevation would make sense for him, or do you think it makes sense for Nebraska to go elsewhere?
I think it would be great. I think he was one of the best pitching coaches I've ever had in my career. But I also know that he's a grandfather, and there's those moments that, being gone, that he misses. And, with Hannah's daughter and everything that he is involved with, and just, seeing the joy when he sees her. And so personally, from the baseball side, that's, hell yeah, immediately. Like, that wouldn't even be a question. But as a father and missing parts of 11 years of my son's life, you can't get that back. And so from a personal level, he can be involved in the aspect that he is now as much as he wants to be. I think if you take that step forward, now you're traveling, now you're recruiting, and now you're gone more. So it's, at the end of the day, it's kind of, I think the ball's in Rob's court. But if I know Rob, and as a man, I would say he's probably going to stay in the position that he's at, just because he gets a little bit more freedom to spend time with his family.
Joba Chamberlain's with us, Husker standout World Series champ. Thoughts on Jeff Christy moving on? And last thought, Joba, and thanks for coming in and giving us your expertise on this, bud. How difficult was this on Will, do you think? I'm not asking you to jump in his mind, but again, you're part of that Nebraska fraternity, knowing how close, and they've been through a lot of rides together at a lot of different spots.
Yeah, I bet in one way, I think it was really hard because it goes beyond coaching. I mean, they've been together so long where they've gotten to know each other on just more than a coaching level. And so in that aspect, I think it was very hard. But then along those same lines, I think it made it a little bit easier because the communication that they've had, and they've been together for so long, where it was difficult no matter what. But it also made it a little bit easier because the relationship that they've created, to where it wasn't like, hey, you just came in, peace, you're out. Like, we've been together, we understand it. This is part of what we get into. We know what's going to happen. And so I think on both sides of it, like, their relationship made it easier, but it also probably made it a little bit hard just because of the bond that they formed, not only with each other, but their families, their wives and kids. And, that's a bond that I don't think will ever be lost. And I think that's the part that makes it a little bit easier. And Jeff's a young guy. I mean, he's 40, I think, maybe not much older than that, not much older than me. So he's got a lot of time left, and he's a great baseball mind and understands the game so well. So, I always wish Jeff nothing but the best, and he'll find his way somewhere if he wants to. If, there could be a different change of venue or whatever, but he'll be all right. And he's one of the great dudes that I've met and, had the opportunity to play with and against and to get to know. So it's been a pleasure, and he'll be just fine.
Joba, we appreciate you, brother. We'll talk soon. Thanks for the time today.
Yep. Take care, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thank you to Joba Chamberlain, Husker great and World Series champ. His thoughts on Nebraska in search for a pitching coach as Jeff Christy and Nebraska and Will both parting ways. And where does Nebraska go next? Do they look at Rob Childress? Do they go elsewhere? Great perspective. Check that full interview out with Joba Chamberlain. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you go to get the segment you want to hear or the entire show, the daily Hail Varsity Radio.
And reading the tea leaves here, no inside information, but from my reading of the tea leaves, and I tend to trust myself reading the tea leaves here, I think Nebraska is going to try to go away from Childress first, because if you're going to elevate a guy from within your own staff, don't you think that would be a part of the initial news release? Like we've let go of Coach Christy. In turn, we'll be elevating Coach Rob Childress into this position. It feels like you would already have that known and ready to go and done by the time you made that announcement. So something tells me Nebraska is going to try to go elsewhere first, and then maybe Childress is your backup plan if you get a week or 2 weeks into this search process and you realize, we haven't found anyone better than you, Rob. Let's make you a different offer to see if that's going to entice you. But I just feel like if Childress was the guy, we would have known by now. And maybe there'll be a news announcement tonight or tomorrow morning, and I'll be completely wrong. But that just strikes me as something that you would announce off the top if you already had that lined up.
Or you're respecting the situation, if you're Will Bolt and, of course, Coach Childress, with one of your comrades for a ton of years, and you're not going to make that announcement right then and there. Hey, we're parting ways. Thanks for everything. Rob, come on down. Maybe you wait, you give it a little bit of air first, or you just rip the Band-Aid. I'm not saying you're not off, but they're going to ask Rob. They're going to ask around. They're going to ask Coach Van Horn probably too. I mean, who do you think is the next dude as a pitching coach? Who's going to come in here? And Joba nailed it with the mentality part of what Rob was great at with the pitching staffs he coached here and coached really at a high level. Jeff Christy was really good, and he developed guys into pros, and his pitching staff did well for the majority of his career here. But as far as those arms that you said the key word you could trust, and some of those younger arms, you just went a different direction moving into the 2023 season, or 2024 season if you're Nebraska baseball. So something needed to change. Will Bolt's in charge of that. He thinks there's a different voice out there pitching coach wise, and Nebraska is going to go and try and find that.
Yeah, it's a case of, to me, as you said, something needed to change. I'm not going to say this is a scapegoat situation, but this is something that, we even discussed kind of 2 weeks ago on this show. Is Nebraska going to make a change with Christy? It was the easy option. Whenever you have such a limited staff in college baseball, your options, you don't have a very long list of changes that can be made. This made the most sense whenever you look back at the past 2 seasons of Husker baseball. The pitching is the one you can look at and say, yeah, you can probably win some more games if your pitching's better. Was it the only problem within this Husker baseball team? No, I don't believe that.
Not even close.
Do I think Jeff Christy did a bad job with the pitchers? I'd also probably say no, but I think you expect more from those pitchers and you want more from those pitchers. So this is the move that I think probably had to be made, and I don't think it's something that has pleased Will to probably do this. So
no, he's miserable. I guarantee you he's miserable about it. And the fact is, your RPI took a beating in a 6-6 record, midweek games. And in those losses, you allowed 7 runs. Now, the teams you're facing, you should score 8. Sorry. Okay. But you shouldn't allow 7 either. And that's just kind of a sliver of a bigger conversation, because Big Ten wise, they've been top 3 for forever in pitching, but you needed to be better than they were, or at least more consistent than they were. Quick reminder about your friends at Dyer Law. Congratulations to the Dyer Law team as they took a fight in front of a federal jury this month in Omaha. After days of testimony, the jury awarded their client $3 million in damages, which is huge. You can trust in the team at Dyer Law to help ensure that your rights are protected and that you get the settlement you deserve. Call Dyer Law today at 402-393-7529 or visit Dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your claim. That's Dyer.law, 402-393-7529.
And
Speaking,
I would say I had one last quick point here on Husker Baseball, Schmidt. If I was doing some research there during your read, and I thought I had this right. I wanted to make sure I had it right. Nebraska Baseball this past season, 2023, in 57 games, they averaged almost 11 base hits per game and 7.5 runs per game. And with all that, they still ended up going 33-21-1 and only 15-9 in conference. So I think if you want to just look at the stats to say
you scored enough to win.
It was a pitching problem. Yeah, you scored enough to win. Did you score enough to be elite? No, probably not. But you scored enough to win some games. Probably do better in the Big Ten than 15-9. And it's not entirely unexpected. We'll see where Husker Baseball goes now.
You needed to find a Sunday arm. You never really settled in on a Sunday arm, and then you didn't know who was going to be a go-to. And then some of the older guys, they didn't always perform like you would have wanted them to perform.
Bullpen was a grab bag.
Yeah, no, fair take. So let's talk the golf mega merger today. That's dominated the national headlines. And the term surprise is what came to my mind, or how the hell did that happen? But yet the PGA Tour and Live Golf, the Saudi-backed Breakaway Tour, agreeing to join forces in the deal. The two sides, it aims at unifying the sport across the globe. The agreement ends ugly litigation that embroiled the two tours as they fought for talent since the Live launch last year. You are not going to be able to outspend what Saudi-backed financing can spend on attorneys. First and foremost, they are able to just throw buckets and buckets of money despite their TV deals sucking at people. And you look at the people that are winning the majors. Recently, they've been Live guys. So why there's been no banning or repercussion? What's the reason to stay with the PGA if you can go make, if you're Tiger Woods, $800 million and still play in all the majors and win the majors? Now, I know Tiger's not in position to do that, but Koepka has been incredible. He just won another major. Phil's been playing good golf. Phil got paid. Koepka got paid $100 million. Meanwhile, you're Rory and some of the other PGA stalwarts that you're second guessing yourself. Aside from principle, now the PGA looks awful because they were too good for air quote blood money, but now, baby, it spends like all other, and that's a really bad look. But maybe you had no choice if you're the PGA. Maybe you were on the verge of losing many, many guys that were dug in with you to the Live Tour.
Just feels spineless. Feels like, yeah, we want our golfers to take the moral high ground, but whenever we get presented with the same opportunity, we're not going to take the moral high ground. That's what it feels like. They held their golfers to a higher standard than they held themselves. You guys can't go take that blood money, but as soon as they throw it our way, we're going to take that $100 million and run with it. It feels wrong, but
Saudi wants an entree into the sports arena to better their image, and now they have the PGA. We'll wind down our one Hail Varsity here at Sherman Field, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, we're here at Sherman Field in Lincoln, junior varsity baseball. I'm getting waved by Captain America, Mr. Everyman Insurance, Ben Bolte. Look at that guy. He just came from the course. Maybe. Yes. Well, so Southwest and East get rolling here at 5. I will have my eyes perched on the bullpen as we dive into a money college football slate for the 2023 season, Elijah. Our old friendly Twitter handle, Big Game Boomer, has listed his top 50 games of the college football season.
Oh, Big Game Boomer. Love him or hate him, he gives us stuff to talk about. I'll give him that.
Yeah, no, I get a kick out of him. So we'll dive into his ranking of best games of the college football season, but specifically we'll drill down a little further on just where we rank Nebraska's toughest to least toughest games. And I was watching the interview that Coach Rhule did with Andy Kindy, a good dude with Channel 7. And that sit down was, all right, what are you thinking here, dude? 5 to 7 wins? Is that fair? And Rhule's like, we can win them all or lose them all. and which is, I feel that way. I still feel that way. So we'll get into most nerve-wracking, least nerve-wracking in the 5 o'clock hour. Open phones for you, too, as well, till about 5:20. Bill Bender going to join us, Sporting News, National College Football Mind. So he'll be with us at 5:25. Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. Can do that email. Can also be a part of the show discussion in the StreamYard, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, or Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Can watch Damon and Andrew weekday morning 7 to 10 with coffee and cream. 489-1240, 489-1240. Shout out to our friends at Gary Michaels. Of course, we're teaming up with them Friday in Estes Park ahead of Nebraska, Colorado. An awesome event in Estes Park with Gary Michaels. Excited to be with them again for another football roadie, and Tommy Frazier out there in Estes. So that is on our mind. Jeff Sims is part of the Gary Michaels team now. Saw that. That's really cool.
Well, do you think Gary is working on getting a Heisman ceremony outfit picked out for Jeff Sims? Are we going to look that far ahead now? He
outfitted Sue for his Heisman.
Yeah, I know
appearance.
that.
And the old thing is, if if we can fit Sue, we can fit you. He outfitted Joba.
That's good.
He outfitted Alex. He gets my fat ass into a sport coat, so I love him for that. So
and you look good too.
Yeah, I got to look respectable when I'm losing my money at Iowa Russ's Derby party. At least I looked good. So, yeah, there's that. But no, pretty interesting hour one. We talked a lot about Texas and Rhule and just what he's doing from the PR side of things and making Nebraska the brand known through him down in Texas, not taking anything for granted with his Texas connections, getting front and center, which is wise. And he's getting a chance to scout out some players down in Houston today. Reminder about buckling up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries only if properly worn. Buckle up. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. So we'll dive in. Winnable and losable. What side do you fall on here with Nebraska's 2023 schedule and some of the bigger games of 2023 on the way? Hour two with Hail Varsity.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you. It's hour two. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. Good stuff from Joba Chamberlain on Nebraska, shaking up their coaching staff in hour one. Bill Bender joins us from the Sporting News in hour two. Open phones for about 20 minutes. We're here at Sherman Field as Southwest in the field against Lincoln East. A quick 2 up, 2 down for Southwest. So the umps take the field. They turn to me because I'm the only guy in the press box here at Sherman and say, "Are you playing the national anthem?" And I kind of put both my hands up and I'm like, I would absolutely salute Old Glory if I knew how to do it. But there's no scorekeeper here for the 5 o'clock JV session.
And see, the umpires, we all know that it's a big part of Legion baseball. You're supposed to have the national anthem before first pitch. It doesn't always happen during spring baseball, but during Legion baseball, that's ordained that you're supposed to play the national anthem if possible. So I understand their perspective there. And Schmidt, you could have hopped on a mic and sang it yourself or something.
I will not defile the national anthem that way.
It's a tough song to sing.
I am, and the other part of what was entertaining here before we got back here into hour two, Junior's effort was for crap running sprints with the rest of the team. Now, I know he's got that Schmidt speed, but he doesn't need to show it like that. At least fake it. They were all running sprints and kind of a delayed takeoff, and He's still got his 2 left feet, man.
Was that running foul poles, or what was that? Was it just...
No, it was just running from the foul line to about center field. So Bo Jackson and Jose Canseco would do it, and it would not end well for Jose back in the day as they were warming up whenever we go down to see the Royals in Oakland.
Well, what's the furthest you need to run as a pitcher? Like, 40 feet from pitcher's plate to first base?
They've got to be in
field
outstanding condition to go deep into ball games, I would think.
Did you ever see Bartolo Colon or CC Sabathia?
No, I know both those guys love to find the buffet table, but I'm sure while they were playing, they had some freakish ability to grind. I mean, they weren't 4-inning guys. A lot of them would go at least to the 7th. Yeah, big sexy Bartolo. God, you look at his rookie card, the then and now. Father Time, undefeated. That's what I'm going to go with. So, Elijah, let's talk a little bit here about the college football schedule. It's going to be a fun year of college football. And you look at some of the national games or games that are circled, and Big Game Boomer listed as 50 most important college football games of the year. Number 1 is Michigan-Ohio State. Do you agree with that? I think so, assuming that Ohio State and Michigan go unscathed against Penn State again this year. But it's really intriguing to see if Harbaugh can get over that hump and go win a championship. They've been right there in some instances, and Ohio State is reeling because they've, dear God, lost 2 in a row to Michigan, and that's getting a little uncomfortable there. Clemson, Florida State comes in at number 2. That's your ACC crown. Your SEC West crown will come down to Alabama and LSU. That is the 3rd most important game. Your SEC East crown comes down to Tennessee at Georgia. Oh, by the way, you also have a non-conference showdown, Florida State, LSU, Tennessee, Bama, Ohio State, Notre Dame sneaks into the top 10. Your Pac-12 North showdowns, Washington and Oregon. Then your non-conference is SC Notre Dame. That's Notre Dame's chance. Big 12 is always Oklahoma, Texas. Nebraska makes this list in the Big Ten, but further down the trough, as they say. The Big Ten West game that's first listed on the top 50 college football games of the season, the first one to appear is going to be Iowa and Minnesota. Minnesota is a sneaky dark horse to get over that hump and win the West. Iowa actually has a quarterback this year, so not as good a defense, but theoretically a better offense. That's saying a lot with Big Brian wearing the headset. Also coming in is Wisconsin, Iowa. That is a decider. You have Minnesota, Wisconsin. That is another decider. Down the trough is Nebraska, Iowa. And then just sneaking into the top 50 is Minnesota, Nebraska. But it's nice to see Nebraska in here where they're not completely written off as a team contending for the West. I think you win Thursday night, August 31st. A lot of great things can happen this season, Elijah. Illinois and Iowa also come in. So there's a lot of Iowa games here. Iowa's going to have a lot of coin flip games, but I think Nebraska also will have a lot of coin flip games this season. And you could get your mind right if you steal a win in Minneapolis to kick off the season.
Mm-hmm. And before we get into Nebraska and their slate, which games we think are most important, I do want to go back to something that you led off with. That was the number 1 game, Michigan-Ohio State. Is that fair? Yes. Michigan-Ohio State, I think until proven otherwise, shows which Big Ten school is going to be going to the college football playoff, at least going to the Big Ten title game. And then you can assume whichever one of those makes the Big Ten title game, even if they lose, you got to assume that they're either going to be 11-1, 12-0. Like, that's probably a pretty good lock to make the college football playoff unless the wheels fall off and Penn State runs the table, which I still think they're a little bit behind both the likes of Michigan and Ohio State, both in terms of recruiting and on-field performance. Could I be surprised? Very much so. But if you're going to do a preseason list, I think it's a joke if you put any game there that is not Michigan-Ohio State as being the most important game in college football this year. There's a reason it's been the most viewed game in college football, I believe, 3 years running now. There's a reason for that. It's because Michigan-Ohio State, it's the last game of the regular season, and it's for all the marbles in the Big Ten East more often than it isn't. So I agree with that 100%. As for Nebraska in their slate, I can't disagree with the fact that Nebraska is going to be further down this list. Yeah, Nebraska gets the national TV eyes. It's still a helmet game. People still know who Nebraska is, but it's hard for me not knowing how the Big Ten West is going to shape up this year, putting really any Big Ten West games in there as the most important games in college football, because whenever I think about a game that's going to be nationally important, this is a game that is going to have national relevancy. When I look at that, I'm looking at either New Year's Six Bowls, I'm looking at your college football playoff. It's going to be important in terms of who goes and wins a conference title game. I don't think there's any team in the Big Ten West that is going to go compete with Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten to go actually win the conference this year. Yeah, a Big Ten West team has to make the conference title game, but a Big Ten West team has never won the conference. It's as simple as that. The Big Ten East dominates the Big Ten right now, so it's hard for me to put any Big Ten West games in there as being nationally important, because how nationally important it is going to be is whoever wins this game goes off and loses, gets beaten by 40 by Michigan in the Big Ten title game. That's how it's been going for the Big Ten West, so it's hard for me to have any Big Ten West game there and say, you know what, this has national relevancy, it's got national importance in what? Who the makeup
sacrificial lamb is,
who the fail-safe is going to be in terms of who's going to be playing in the Rose Bowl because your conference title winner is going and playing in the college football playoff. Like I struggle to see much national relevancy in the Big Ten West as a whole.
Well, don't kid yourself. I mean, the Big Ten West team that has been runner-up hasn't even qualified since Iowa for the Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. It's been, let's take the third place Big Ten East team, Penn State, to go off, and there's 2 New Year's Day sixes where you'll have a Fiesta Bowl for Ohio State, or last year you got both into the playoff, and that was really cool for the Big Ten. Now, what this comes down to is you're trying to gauge who has a shot at getting to the Big Ten West crown, and then who's got a one night only, anything can happen moment in Indianapolis to take down an Ohio State or a Michigan just to go back to the Rose Bowl, because chances are your West team isn't going to be in position for one of the 4 playoff teams.
Well, it's much more likely, in my opinion, that anything can happen one night, that a team like Nebraska or Minnesota or somebody can go take down the likes of Michigan or Ohio State on a random night in late September or early October, rather than, you know what, it's December, it's in Indianapolis, it's for all the marbles. Like, we didn't even get, aside from, I believe, Wisconsin, Ohio State, a crossover Big Ten West versus Big Ten East matchup. Like, I look at Nebraska's schedule in terms of the importance of Nebraska's slate and games that they win. Nebraska, Michigan is pretty far down the list in terms, in my opinion, of important games this year. Because if Nebraska loses that game, everyone goes, well, that was expected.
You're supposed to.
But in terms of national relevancy, that game is more important than it is to Nebraska fans, because yeah, if Nebraska gets it rolling, if they're 4-0 headed to Michigan, that game is now very, very important for Michigan, because you got a hot Nebraska team that believes in themselves, that has more confidence than they've had in a decade, most likely. Now they're playing Michigan, your presumptive Big Ten champion, or at least a team that should be competing for the Big Ten, coming to Memorial Stadium in September, and it now goes up an echelon in terms of the importance of this game. Like, Nebraska and Iowa could maybe determine who's going to win the Big Ten West come November. Maybe, but it's a lot more likely, in my opinion, that you have a confident Nebraska team coming off of wins against Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech and maybe Colorado too. And I guess we'll throw Minnesota in there, not knowing how the season's going to go. It's a lot more likely that game, Nebraska-Michigan, is going to have more national relevancy than Nebraska-Iowa.
Listen, it's a national stage. It's a showcase. It's, all right, what kind of scare, what kind of opportunity do you take with this moment against Michigan? Do you get to Michigan undefeated? That's a big ask. As we rank the Nebraska games, I mean, to me, your most important game is going to still be that Minnesota game. Can you actually get off on the right foot if you're Nebraska football? You've not done that forever. You've not won the opener forever, or you've not won a conference opener forever. And you've started out on the road, God, for a lot of years. You just have, right? That's been your lot in life. Go open up on the road somewhere. Go to Ireland, all right? Go to Illinois. Go be on the road. Thank you for letting us rent you out, Nebraska, your brand and your eyeballs and your viewership numbers. Go on the road again. And all the problems you caused us, the headaches you gave us in 2020, we're going to still continue to throw you out there on the road. And that's what Nebraska's had to deal with. They've not had a advantageous setup. I mean, even think about when they got into the Big Ten. What was their opener? It was at Wisconsin, Camp Randall. It was awesome. Nebraska was in it till halftime, but they ended up getting drilled by Russell Wilson. It was 48-17. It was 17-17, and Nebraska kind of collapsed there. So, no, Nebraska's most important game is going to be Minnesota. Go steal that one. Start off the conference season, for the love of God, 1-0. Go pound Dion and the Baby Buffs, and then figure it out. Try and get there. I'm not expecting them to go win at Minnesota, but be right there. Nebraska should not have a 4-game losing streak to Minnesota. And the way they've lost those games, either they've been blown out or they've been absolutely incompetent, where they played with a hand grenade and blew their face off. That's how the last few Minnesota games have gone. Minnesota's made more plays, bled more clock, got more first downs, and out-toughed Nebraska in all these one-score losses. So Minnesota absolutely kickstarts your season in a great way if you can go get it done. That's my number 1, 2, and 3. Sentimentally, yeah, go win in Boulder. Start out 2-0. That'd be great.
Most important game to me, it can't be Minnesota, simply because if you drop that game, I think you can.
It's not the end of the world, but it could make things go so it could accelerate things positively if you get it, is what I'm saying.
It's low risk, high reward. It's low risk, high reward. And that's why I can't put it down, because I have to look further down this schedule. I go look at a game that we've talked about. I think we talked about it with the Vogel last week. Nebraska at Illinois on a Friday night. It's not the sexy answer. I think that might be your most important game of the season, because you're coming off a game against Michigan, which, let's be honest, Nebraska's probably going to lose that game against Michigan. And you have 3 games coming up with 1 bye week. You have a Friday night game against Illinois, and then you have a divisional matchup against Northwestern 2 weeks later after a bye, and then 3 weeks later you have another home matchup against Purdue. These are 3 teams that you have not been able to beat consistently over the past couple of seasons, and they're the teams you need to beat if you want to have a chance in the Big Ten West. So Nebraska, let's assume they're coming off a loss to Michigan. I'll just leave it at that. We'll assume that's a loss. Don't call me angrily. Nebraska's got a chance. You know what? Based on recent results, Michigan should win that football game. It's as simple as that. So let's assume you're coming off a loss. You got to go play at Illinois, the pig farmer, a guy who has beaten you 2 consecutive years, both in somewhat disappointing fashion. Now you have to go beat him in order to gain some momentum before Northwestern and Purdue, 2 teams you have to beat if you want to have a chance in the Big Ten West. That Illinois game, it's not sexy, but it's really, really important in the grand scheme of Nebraska's season.
Do you look at getting off to a 1-0 conference start, or do you look at Nebraska
gaining some momentum halfway through the year?
Kind of by that mile marker point in the season where you're into early October. All right, how do you finish out before your bye week, and where's your record overall? Are you at 4-1? Do you go into your bye week with back-to-back losses, Minnesota and Illinois on a short week? Do you split that with a Minnesota win? Are you at 5-1 going into the bye week? Who knows, man? It's going to be a pretty incredible season. Going to be a lot of fun to see how things shake out. Bill Bender's on the way with the sporting news at Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow Tuesday, as we're here at Sherman Field awaiting the first pitch. And we say hi to Bill Bender, sporting news at Bill Bender 92 on Twitter. Bill, has your summer been filled with ball fields and sunflower seeds as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, we run around between softball and lacrosse. We've had a lot going on. But, you know, that's what we love. Both kids are at that age where they're able to play and play a lot of sports, and we encourage that, so it's definitely not a problem for us.
It's a good time and just great camaraderie with the kids and the parents, and it's a fun time. So the list just came out for the 2024 college football coaches and player nominees. A couple of Nebraska names ended up on this list. Frank Solich, the coaching part, Danny Woodhead, an incredible player at Chadron State. Danny's a friend of the show and, of course, had a lengthy, productive NFL career. You've seen Coach Solich up close and personal at his time at Ohio, and I'm sure followed him at Nebraska. But when you look at the criteria and the names on this list, Bill, I'd have to think Frank's got a pretty good shot at getting in on his first try, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, obviously coached in a championship game, had a great winning percentage, good player too. And, obviously his time at Ohio University, I mean, we were in a bowl game every year. I think Ohio had made one bowl game prior to his arrival, and then they became and some of that was with they made more bowl games. But, class act all the way too. So anything that happens with Frank Solich where he gets recognition, I'm all for it.
You look at kind of the tales of both careers, following a legend in Coach Osborne and really keeping things going. It was just it would have been hard, Bill, for anyone to keep Nebraska at that level in the mid-90s. But even so, 2 years before his dismissal, Nebraska was playing, in the championship game against a loaded Miami team. There's that. He's the last coach to win a conference championship for Nebraska, which is so weird to say, 1999. So there'll be consideration just for the Nebraska part, but the Ohio part, to your point about the bowl games and taking the Ohio program to a certain level where, Bill, in your neck of the woods, what did folks think about Ohio football occasionally taking down some of the big names? I know one of Frank's biggest early wins was Penn State, but routinely in that 7 to 9, maybe even 10 win range of victories per season.
Yeah, and at Ohio when I was there, we were fortunate to have Jim Grobe as head coach, and he kind of set the table. And then, I mean, for anybody that wants to see the impact, go look at the list of seasons for Ohio from the 70s through the 80s. It's barren. It's really bad. And then Jim did a good job. Brian Knorr did a good job. And Frank comes in and knocks it out of the park. I mean, the two big wins we always talk about is they beat Pitt on a Friday night when Pitt had Tyler Palko and Dave Wannstedt, and there was a walk-off interception at Peden Stadium. And, then the Penn State victory to start that season when they had Tyler Tettleton at quarterback. It was, that was the cool part, is seeing your alma mater at Mac School win games like that. And, Frank obviously, when I was talking to people about him over my career as a college football writer, I was always happy to hear Nebraska fans cheering for him and cheering for Ohio University. And I think he recruited well out of Nebraska a little bit there for a while too. So all good things from his career there. And set the table for Tim Albin too, who did a nice job last year, won 10 games.
Bill Binder's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, just to zoom out, a bit of a bigger picture question here. Frank Solich, you look at his coaching career. He started at Lincoln Southeast High School, where I can tell you I went there. He's still a legend. He's still up on the wall. And then he goes to Nebraska, where he was there for almost 2 decades, is a legend at Nebraska, won a national title, had a great winning percentage. Then he goes off to Ohio, where he becomes a legend in his own right around there. How rare is it in modern college football that a coach, every single place he goes, ends up being a legend there?
Well, I mean, that's rare, like you said, but I think what endures is, and I got a chance to talk to him several times, it's his preference to not be in the spotlight. He obviously, when you're a head coach, you're in the spotlight, but he always gave credit everywhere else. You would try to write a story about him, and it was hard because he didn't want to talk about himself. And I think that always stood out with me with him. And I wrote a couple stories about his time at OU and went down to some games, and just his politeness, his toughness. I mean, the way his teams played was tough. It's how he was as a player, as a running back, as a defensive coordinator. All the things that he did at Nebraska, and I'm sure he did them at your alma mater as well.
Bill, let's look at the college football season, and it could be a swan song for 4 teams in the Pac-12. What's your feeling? What's your intel telling you here about Colorado, the Arizonas, and Utah? Are the U-Haul vans in the proverbial driveway to move to Big 12 country?
I mean, there's some smoke, and I think the Big 12 is being very proactive here. I mean, talk about a conference losing 2 of its huge brands, well, 3 if you count Nebraska, honestly, 4 with Texas A&M, and still being able to survive. So it's not the Big 8 or the Big 12 that we grew up with, but it is a proactive means of survival for that conference. So you have to applaud Brett Yormark for that if they do, in fact, grab Colorado and Arizona and go from there, or continue, or even UConn. I was reading about that before I got on the air. So, yeah, I think they've got a chance to market that as a basketball conference, to keep building off that, to all the schools in their football right now have between stadiums of 40 and 65,000 seats, not dollars. So, Chris, I think it's a way of saying that maybe they're pretty self-aware of what they have right now, and if you add a Colorado or Arizona, that would be good for the conference.
Bill Bender's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And, Bill, with the Big 12 expansion, what do you think the ceiling of that conference can be should some of these moves come to fruition? You look at the Big 10 and the SEC, they're the big dogs in college football. Would the Big 12 be a tier below that? Would they be still neck and neck with the ACC? Where do you foresee them ending up should this expansion go through as expected? Or maybe not as expected, but as rumored?
Well, I mean, 3 or 4 in the pecking order. I mean, and with the 12-team playoff, where there's going to be X number of automatic champions that get in, they'll probably get a playoff team every year. So if you're Oklahoma State, you're excited about that. If you're TCU, you're excited about that. Cincinnati coming into the conference, BYU, a team that kind of was loosely in that playoff conversation at times, I'd say they would all be excited about that opportunity. So, again, I just marvel at the fact that this conference lost to Oklahoma and Texas 2 summers ago. And depending on what happens with the ACC and with the Big 12, you could make the argument that it's the 3rd strongest conference right now.
Bill, do you think next on the wish list for some of the SEC and Big 10 is to go after the ACC? Do they start, if it makes sense, absorbing some of those schools? Does the ACC try and stay out on their own? And then second part is Washington and Oregon. Do they take, it'd be a pay increase to get out of the Pac-12, but maybe take a pay cut to join a Big 10? Or do they look more towards the Pac-12 or the Big 12? Excuse me. So I'm wondering, how does the rest of this earthquake fall into place?
Well, so I mean, hypothetically, if Colorado and Arizona State go to the Big 12, I think Washington and Oregon, if the Big 10 wants to expand, they would really push to do that, and that would give the Pac-12 or the Big 10 wing of sorts, which I do think makes sense on some level, to have a couple other travel partners out west for USC and UCLA. I could see that. I could see if the SEC wants to expand more, though they can't get an 8 and 9 game schedule set up, figured out, that maybe they would be willing to add a Florida State or a Clemson. Those have been rumored. I mean, we've read reports today that the Big Ten might be interested in North Carolina and Miami. So if the Big Ten really wanted to get crazy, they could go get North Carolina, Miami, Virginia, Washington, Oregon, and then, maybe dangle that all to Notre Dame and try to make them a full-time member and go to like 20 to 24 schools.
Bill, does Notre Dame get their $75 million payday they're wanting from their TV partner, or do they go join a league? That's their leverage play right now. What do you think happens? Do they get to stay independent, or are they just going to take a paycheck, even if it means joining a league? They've been independent for so long.
Right. I think probably going to try to stay as independent as long as possible and take that TV money. And, with the way the playoffs set up, they don't get a bye, but they can still get in without playing a conference championship game. Jack Swarbrick's been pretty adamant about them doing that. But, again, you saw the report last week that they are now an AAU credentialed school. So we all know what that means. That means maybe the Big Ten with their AAU schools could possibly add Notre Dame. So I've always thought that one made the most sense. I don't know why it hasn't happened. And it's certainly possible down the line. But as long as they stay in that arrangement with the ACC should be fine.
Bill, it seems to me, to switch gears here just a little bit and go to the Pac-12 with what's going to happen to them, it seems to me that they're in danger. So what would the path forward be for you if you were Commissioner Kliavkov with the Pac-12? What are you going to be doing to try to keep that conference together?
I mean, you got to try to hang on and not let Colorado and Arizona State go, because right now no addition that they make is better than what they've lost, right? I mean, or you could work toward, I suppose, if you're going to surrender a little bit, maybe work toward a mega conference of the Big 12 and Pac-12. And, again, we're talking about a 24-team league. I don't know where that leaves Washington State and some of those schools, but this is, again, the consequence of realignment. Some of it makes sense to me, some of it doesn't. Some of it, and all of it, not some of it, all of it is motivated by money.
Bill Bender, as he's joining us here, Sporting News. You can find Bill on Twitter at BillBender92. More of the conversation with Bill on college football, Nebraska, and how things are going to maybe shake out. Fun 2023 lies ahead. Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We're here at Sherman Field, 1-1 JV baseball going on as I watch the more college football thoughts. Bill Bender continues with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Bill Bender's with us, Sporting News at BillBender92. Bill, let's talk a little bit here about Nebraska as media days here coming up in about 6 weeks in Indy. Day 2 will be Nebraska's day. And what type of buzz are you expecting for Nebraska on a national scale? I ask that just because Coach Rhule seems to be pretty well respected and very popular amongst the national media. The local media here already love the guy because he's such a good communicator, and we're really anxious to see what year one can look like when you look at the talent that is here and the way he's going to coach and develop.
Well, I think he'll do well on the podium. He always does. He's that kind of guy. And I think he has generated some real excitement. And it circles back to the Frank Solich thing. Having him at the spring game was a great step. I think the goal for Matt Rhule needs to be not to ignore Nebraska's past. There's no question, right? Like, it happened. It's great. But also to push Nebraska into the future. And I really think ever since Frank Solich left, that has been the struggle for the program. But if you listen to Matt Rhule's messaging, it's pretty good. When you look at his work at Baylor and Temple, the offense was fun to watch. It was built with good offensive line, running the football, good quarterback play. And if he gets all those things, could be pretty good on that side of the ball. I really think the short-term goal should simply to be make a bowl game this year and go from there. And then you can build off that. With
that bowl game goal, and yes, that needs to be a goal. It's been a long 6 years, Bill. But what do you think Nebraska has in Sims? Are you high on Sims based on what you've been able to see from Georgia Tech, or are you reserved on Sims just because of the injury history?
Well, I think with Sims, there was some bright spots. He played on some bad teams, though. It was, he had moments at Georgia Tech last year. in particular, where you saw, some efficiency in his passing. And if he can do that, Nebraska's offense gets the ball out quick, and then the running is a bonus. So, again, I think this is a fresh start for him, a good offense for him to be in with Matt Rhule, and, we'll see how it goes. But he did certainly have some tough times and some interceptions at Georgia Tech.
Bill Bender's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And, Bill, whenever you look at Nebraska's first two games, we've had plenty to say about that on this show here over the past couple weeks as the kickoff times have been announced. But whenever you look at those first two, it's a Thursday night contest opening week 1 against Minnesota, and then a big noon kickoff spot against Colorado. We know Husker fans are going to be watching, but how much of the national needle do you think those games are going to move?
Well, I mean, the Minnesota game, anytime you have a Big Ten opener, there'll be some interest in that. Minnesota is a chic kind of Big Ten sleeper for this season. And that you'll have that. But I think that the Colorado game is going to have a lot of eyeballs on it because Matt Rhule and Deion Sanders were in on a couple of the same recruits. Remember that from the last cycle? They're both very outspoken. Their rebuilds, it's an old rivalry. It's sold out. Fascination factor with both programs will be high. I remember, one of I believe it was Scott Frost's debut was against Colorado, right? And they played a great game. And I believe Nebraska lost, but that's the kind of atmosphere I would anticipate when those two schools play.
Have you made a determination on Coach Prime, what year one's going to look like, or are you just going to grab the popcorn?
Well, that, and, there'll be ups and downs. There'll probably be downs early in the season. They play TCU. They play Nebraska. They play Oregon and USC before September 30th. So there's a really good chance that Colorado could be 1-4. And I think they will develop in the second half of the season. I do want to see what Shedeur Sanders does at quarterback. Travis Hunter could be a really talented two-way player. Most people have their mind made up on Deion, though, and I don't think that's going to change. So I would predict or anticipate that they win around 4 games at max 5, and there's some improvement, and we'll see if he can build on that in recruiting. And what if they do join the Big 12, what that does from a recruiting bump for allowing them to get into the state of Texas.
Deion is ready to help start packing Louis so we can get back down to Texas, Bill. Bill Bender's with us, Sporting News at Bill Bender 92. Last thought, Bill, we'll get you out. Thanks again to talk ball with us. What's your takeaway? What do you think it says about the SEC sticking with 8 games?
Well, I think they're trying to work out the TV end of it. That's the short-term answer. But, I mean, there's no reason for them not to play 9. I mean, it's just such an easy schedule model that I would anticipate the Big Ten adopts, where you play 3 protected rivalry games, and there'll be some hashing out to do there, and some schools will get the short end of the stick, and you play 6 schools one year, 6 the next, and then you alternate, and that means you get to play in every venue once every 4 years, at least once. It's so easy to do. You can do it on a spreadsheet in 10 minutes. So it's clearly about money and TV and, haggling over who those protected opponents would be in a 9-game schedule, because they're still going to get a lot of teams in the playoff, and they're still going to be the dominant conference until they magically stop recruiting as well as they do. So I don't understand why they're in an 8-game. I get it as long as it's a Band-Aid. If it's a thing that they try to do into the late 2020s, then something's wrong.
Can you see an argument by the SEC where if we keep our brand name schools away from eating one another, that we'll have a better shot, we being the SEC, have a better shot of the 4th team in the playoff versus a perceived 3 or division champs, and then the runner-up of the best runner-up of the SEC East or SEC West? If Bama's having to play a tougher schedule, Georgia's having to play a tougher schedule, you start knocking one another off. Can that hurt them when it comes to playoff spots?
If that's their argument, it's very disingenuous, because I think it hasn't hurt the Big Ten going to 9. Has going to 9 games kept Ohio State out of the playoff? No. Michigan? No. Penn State, if they would ever to get there? No. So I think if you're good enough to win your conference, plus in the 12-team playoff, 2- and 3-loss teams are going to get in the playoff. And the strength of schedule, in theory, will help. I think, that's something to watch in that first year of the playoff. Watch how many Big Ten teams get in versus watch how many SEC teams get in. And if there's a strength of schedule argument at that point between an SEC school and a Big Ten school, it should favor the Big Ten school because they played a nice conference game.
Bill, take care. We'll check in with you, and we'll plan on seeing you in Indy, bud. Thanks so much.
Hey, no problem, man. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much for having me.
Good to get caught up with Bill Bender. The world of college football covered there with the sporting news is Bill Bender at BillBender92. Check out the full interview, podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio. And get that subscription. It costs you nothing. Get your subscription out of the magazine and digital as well, hailvarsity.com/offer. As we're loaded up, we are going to be back on the road tomorrow. Dan Hartog, as it's the summer of Legion baseball. Things are still tight. Good ball game between Southwest and Lincoln East. The JV ranks, varsity's finding their way in, and some dirt being dished on Big Ten programs. We'll tell you about that next at Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity Radio on the road today here at Sherman Field in Lincoln. And the baseball tour continues tomorrow at Hartog. Elijah Herbel back in studio, and plenty of things to get to tomorrow. The anonymous coach speak is out. We will get it all covered tomorrow. What do coaches around the league really think of not only Nebraska, but also some of the programs Nebraska going to be competing against. Big thanks to Joba Chamberlain, his reaction to Jeff Christy and Will Bolt parting ways with the Nebraska program. Some insight on where Nebraska baseball can go next with their pitching staff. So Joba joined us in hour one. In hour two, Bill Bender spent time with us. Tomorrow, we'll hang out with Mike Babcock. We may have to send a signal flare to Shuey at Wilderness Ridge. He is all sorts of busy. We're going to try and get Shuey's take on things with Liv and PGA tomorrow. Evan Bland will join us to talk some satellite camp and Husker baseball tomorrow. So that's all on the schedule for Hail Varsity Radio tomorrow. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, where you get the podcast. You can watch the video. Hail Varsity YouTube channel is where you can also comment. Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Find me at Schmidt_radio and Elijah at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbal. What's the plan tonight? You going to get a workout in? You going for a walk? You firing up the grill?
There's all three, actually.
Are you really?
If I'm lucky. I've had some chicken marinating overnight. I just kind of threw together what I hope to be a Mexican, almost Chipotle-flavored chicken marinade. So
nice.
I used some jalapeno peppers, a yellow onion, whole bunch of different herbs and spices as well. So we'll see how that turns out. That's going to go on the grill most likely once dinner's done for. I think maybe a little walk as the weather starts cooling down. The sun goes down, probably 9:30ish. Go for a little walk, come back home and see if I can get in a body weight workout before it's time for bed. So that's all of the above. I try to keep myself busy as opposed to just stressing about my nuggets. So that's the plan for tonight.
Are you gonna pour one, or are you pouring one tomorrow night?
Probably neither, but we'll see.
That's a wrong answer, Elijah. I respect it though, as you stay dry during the week. You can't not watch your favorite team in the finals compete for a championship and not have a cold one.
You can whenever you say, well, they play Friday night. Maybe I can just save it for Friday night. I don't know. It's I think the one argument would be I get stressed out whenever I watch the Nuggets play, especially a game like this.
Stress drink.
And then I look at it the other way and I go, well, if I'm dealing with my stress by pouring myself a little glass of whiskey or cracking a beer, what does that say about myself? And then I say that's a problem for a therapist, not a problem for me.
Says you're normal and human. It's all right. So I was informed today by some of my wife's friends that she didn't quite get asked to leave the pool area today, but there may have been a Will Ferrell old school reenactment incident where she was probably not nice to young children.
Really?
She was, yeah, because they were splashing her.
Well, then that's deserved.
No, I got to find out these kids and see if we can chip in on their allowance.
I think
do it again.
That falls under the old adage, I'm going to censor it, talk trash, get hit. I think that falls under. If you're splashing somebody, I think that falls under that same category.
They were just making fun of her wings. My wife has to wear wings in the pool because she can't swim.
Even kids got to understand their actions have repercussions.
Wow. At least she didn't have a trank dart. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow at 4. Hail Varsity back at you, presented by Currency.